a lot of people forget that the courts will side with the seller if you try to say that I couldn't sell my current home, so therefore I can get out under the financing contingency. That's for people who don't use a home sale contingency. They submit the offer, they don't talk to the appropriate legal counsel, and they think, well, if I can't sell my place and I get denied because I'm carrying too much debt, then I'll be able to just get out under the financing contingency. That is not true, and you will lose your earnest money or potentially worse. So make sure as
Hey everybody, it is your favorite managing broker here, and today, per usual, I am joined by MRich of Braun Rich, and today we're going to be talking about contingencies, and we're going to start by talking about the home sale contingency, because I've realized there sometimes can be a lot of confusion around this. It is a contingency we don't use very often, so because of that, it's really important for us to understand it, and also to be able to explain it correctly to our clients on both ends, right? When we are representing a buyer, where we might be using it, as well as when we are on the list side and we receive an offer with a home sale contingency. So Matt, the expert, I'm going to let you take it away.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, I think home sale contingencies are really relevant right now, given the kind of competitive nature of good properties on the market. And so using it properly may set your client up for the best success of submitting an offer with a home sale contingency and having it accepted, because in a competitive market, a lot of sellers are looking past people with home sale contingencies. So I think what's important is to start with what is the home sale contingency rider and how to properly deal with it and explain it. So right now we're looking at the Chicago Association of Realtors Rider 4. It is the equivalent is sort of paragraph 30 of the multi-board. This is what we would use if we wanted to submit an offer with a home sale contingency. And I think there's three important things you need to think about when you're dealing with this document. One, properly filling it out, completing it fully. Two, understanding the contingencies within this contingency. And then three, being able to explain to your client the kick-out provision. So the first thing, which we see here in kind of lines 1 through 10, even ones, really the whole document, is one, filling it out. Why do we submit an offer with a home sale contingency? One, we probably can't buy our next home. We can't buy this home without selling our existing home and frees up capital. So this is a really great tool to, one, fill out properly by putting all the relevant information in. I see all too often the contingency rider signed by everybody and not filled out. So obviously you've got to put your property in, and you've got to, in paragraph 2, which is similar to the multi-board, you've got to complete where you are in the process. Are you under contract? If you are you subject to any contingencies? Make sure it is properly completed. So that's really the first step, explaining that, like, hey, we got to properly do this. And then two, I would say talking about the contingencies within the contingency. So, you're going to be presenting an offer. The best way you can do it, one, is to not have any, have your buyer be done with attorney review and their financing contingency, but sometimes that's just not possible. So when you're filling out the second section or paragraph 30 of the multi-board, you want to make sure you're properly explaining that, like, hey, okay, hey, Mr. Seller, we have a sale, or we don't, but if we do, it's under financing contingency still, or we're still in attorney review because we just got this under contract. You want to make sure it's listed if it's not under contract still, and if it's not listed, when is it going to be listed? Who is going to do the listing? Things need to be filled in correctly. So that's kind of the second part. The third part is the kick-out provision, and the kick-out provision is important because you're under contract and you may get this contingency accepted, but the seller has the ongoing right to offer the property for sale. And if they get a bona fide offer, which is really a fancy legal way of saying a legitimate offer from somebody else, whether it's lower price but just better terms, whether it's just a third party who just said, look, I want to buy your property, and it may not be anywhere near the terms, but you just want to accept it to have it as a seller, as the buyer, I may have a certain period of time to waive my contingencies. And if I don't, I lose the contract. So That's really important to explain to your seller and to your buyer. Seller, you still have a benefit of accepting this contract because you can go out and sell it to somebody else and force this buyer to waive or to walk away. And buyer, this gives this seller the option to take in your deal, and you as the buyer at least get an offer accepted. So I think these are really important pieces. So obviously, again, making sure you fill it out correctly, fill out the contingencies, and then, of course, this kick-out provision. I do want to explain a little difference because a lot of people use the multi-board. The multi-board up in paragraph 1 has a provision not only for a contract closing contingency, but they also have the getting of the contract contingency. So there's one part that says I'm going to get a contract by this certain day, and if we don't get it, either party can, either buyer can walk away or the contract is terminated. And then, of course, it has the closing contingency. So it's a little bit different than the form rider here. This is a little more basic. I like it because it doesn't have all of the terms. But if you're using the multi-board, keep in mind there's 2 contingencies to be thinking about. So that's really, the form, and explaining to your buyers, great to use because you got to sell your place to buy this place. Hey, seller, great for you because you can accept this contract. You're not feeling like this is your best offer, but yet still market the property. So if I'm thinking about this, then maybe we go into the reasons and the considerations that a contingency might be used like this, and that we can pull up on my Braun and Rich.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. Stop screen share. Let's go ahead and pull up what else we got. So here we go. All right.
Okay, so I prepared this and Paul can send it out to everybody. It's just kind of considerations on what we're seeing in the market right now, because like I said in the beginning, this is a bizarrely competitive market. So a really nice home in the suburbs, or even the city, of course, maybe seeing 5, 10 offers, and one of them with a contingency like a home sale contingency may not be the most appealing, but there's ways to set your buyer up to win that kind of competitive bid, even with a home sale, and as a seller to understand what the benefits may be of taking that offer. So when we start with the buyer, one, home sale contingency may offer more favorable terms to the seller, right? Better purchase price, longer, closing dates if they need it, shorter closing dates potentially, depending on what the buyer is selling. It may be offering better terms to that particular seller that they just can't pass up. Other considerations we're seeing here are other contingencies. So financing contingency. If I'm representing the buyer and I want to win this bid, I feel my buyer's strong enough, I'm going to waive that financing contingency. I mean, it gives the seller the comfort of knowing that, like, as long as they get the contract and they sell their home, there's no other contingency here that I have to worry about. And if you can't do that, maybe you do an appraisal contingency waiver where we say, look, we're not going to terminate based on the appraisal falling through or coming in lower. So there's ways to play with it if I'm the buyer to make it more appealing for the seller. Another possibility is waiving the inspection contingency, not necessarily not doing the inspection, but submitting an as-is offer, promising not to nickel and dime. We're not going to ask for anything. If anything comes up, that's going to be on us because we want the property so bad. Then I would think about offering concessions. Paul, you and I talked about this offline. People are offering crazy concessions. I mean, it could be something basic like low tax credit, 100%. I mean, in the suburbs, you're seeing, Cook County suburbs go way up with their triennial. You may be like, look, I'll take the chance and I'll just risk it and have 100% low tax credit. You may offer flexible closing situations. So post-closing possession, which I don't love as a buyer's attorney, but if I'm offering, a submission with home sale closing contingency, maybe I let the seller stay there for a while. I've seen no daily payments. I've seen low security deposits. And then I've seen other things like we've talked about seller closing expenses being paid for. You told me that you saw somebody offering basically their timeshare for 20 years for a week. I mean, you think about anything you can offer the seller to make it more appealing, that's happening in this market. So it doesn't just work for the buyer, it also works for the seller. As the seller, I can kind of dictate the contract submission a little bit differently. Obviously, going back to paragraph 1 with the favorable terms, that works for me. I can dictate the purchase price, and I can dictate what I want to see. If I'm seeing an offer that's great from a buyer, but I see that the buyer, I kind of find out I kind of find out what's going on with the buyer's sale. Are they offering market conditions on their sale, or what's going on? I mean, I kind of dictate the show, and I get a lot more information that way, to set me up to ask for more reasonable price and better terms. Of course, like I said above, I can tell the buyer, I'm not going to allow you to submit an offer with financing contingency. If I'm going to give you this offer with a home sale contingency, forget it. Waive all of your contingencies, inspection, limited home association, owners association, things like that. So again, there's ways that reflect on the seller side, things that you're doing on the buyer side that benefit the seller, and it makes it possible to walk into an offer situation with a home sale contingency and win the bid. And that's how I look at it, because we are still seeing contingencies out there for sure.
Yeah,
Do
that's
you have
actually really
questions
great.
on your end?
No, I mean, I think it's there's a few I'll toss at you in a second, but I think that you made some really great points there because at the end of the day, the home sale contingency we've always looked at as such a negative, right? A lot
Right,
of
right.
sellers do not want to go ahead and accept it, but if it's something that our buyers truly need, to actually be able to get them to allow them to play out in the market, what else can we give up so they still have that security of the home sale contingency and make their offer more attractive? So I think you've made some really really great points with that.
Right. And I think that, like, before you offer a home sale contingency, and I talked about this with my law partner, you kind of want to explore, as the buyer's agent, every possible solution here. So like financing, for example, do I have relatives that can help? Do I have the ability to do a bridge loan with, my current assets, as security? Like, what you have to be practical and explore all the possibilities, before you submit it. I mean, if you can't do that, most people can't, then you submit the home sale contingency. But it's really, you got to be clever when you're, looking at winning a competitive bid situation too.
Yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this on the home sale contingency route. You had mentioned how important it is to fill everything out correctly.
Yeah.
What would you say would be the number one mistake you've seen brokers make with either the home sale contingency rider, with the car rider, or with the multi-board?
So the biggest thing I see is like not matching the dates with the anticipated purchase date. I'm sorry. So the purchase and sale date not matching. I'll get like a home sale contingency that has an earlier contract closing, like a closing date that doesn't match with the day that they're selling their property. So, you're at the closing date on the regular contract of May 15th, for example, but your home sale, like the one that your existing property is like May 17th. So that doesn't make sense. Like, gotta
Gotcha.
like fill these things out properly. I know it sounds like duh, but it actually, those you can't, you got to make sure you can offer something that you can do. That's a big thing. And then
Exactly.
just leaving things blank in this particular instance isn't great, because then you're leaving it to the attorneys during attorney review to kind of negotiate material terms. And I'm not saying we're not going to do that for you or your agents, but when it comes to material terms, a lot of agents will attest. If I start playing with that in attorney review, the seller is going to be like, I took this because I heard this, or I took this because you
Yeah.
said this. Fill it out so when we get to the contract, and I don't have to play with it at all.
Exactly. That's just going to create more doubt in the seller's mind, and especially if there is another offer that's either on the sidelines or something that could come in, it's an easy reason for them to go ahead and kill the deal, right, and move
Right.
on with something else. So I guess the last question I have for you is, when we do talk about other contingencies that we may go ahead and waive in the contract, whether we're waiving financing or we're doing something as is, or truly actually crossing out the inspection period or the inspection contingency in the contract. What mistakes do you see being made there? Is there
Okay,
any maybe
so
one
that's a
major
really
mistake
good
we're seeing a
question.
lot?
The biggest mistake I see is, it's not necessarily waiving. Let's say you maintain the financing condition or contingency. A lot of people forget that the courts will side with the seller if you try to say that I couldn't sell my current home, so therefore I can get out under the financing contingency. That's for people who don't use a home sale contingency. They submit the offer, they don't talk to the appropriate legal counsel, and they think, well, if I can't sell my place and I get denied because I'm carrying too much debt, then I'll be able to just get out under the financing contingency. That is not true, and you will lose your earnest money or potentially worse. So make sure as an agent you understand that there's nothing in the contract that gets you out that way. So that's why we need the home sale contingency.
Great
As
point.
far as
Great point.
I mean, as far as waiving the contingency, I mean, you have to discuss with your buyer what the impact of waiving the financing contingency. That's probably the biggest one. The seller does not want to see a financing contingency. They want to know that you're a strong candidate as soon as you sell your property. So you have to be able to talk to them about the risk. And again, you're not an attorney or shouldn't be practicing the law, but you can give them general ideas like, hey, we can't get out of the deal because you can't get financing, right? Like when you waive this, there is nothing for you to lean on there. Other contingencies, obviously, like the as is super important too. You need to be able to tell the seller, I'm not going to pick on anything in the house. I love it. I'm going forward no matter what. And those are like kind of the two main ones to get rid of. But you have to be able to talk to your buyer about what that really means. Because I just did an attorney review today where it was as is, and yet they still wanted to raise radon. Now, I get it. You don't know if radon's there when you're submitting an offer. So, well, why should be able to raise it? Well, you can't because it's as is. Now the seller can walk away from the deal. So, things to consider. Those are the two main contingencies I'd be thinking about talking to your buyers about.
Great.
And is the seller demanding that they're gone?
Yeah, exactly right.
I don't know if that was answering your question, but like that's kind of what how I think of it.
No, that's perfect. And I think it is really important for us too. We always like to talk about the different things we can do with contingencies on the buy side, but we also have to realize on the seller side, these are things that we can be asking for in some scenarios. And like I had in my office meeting this morning, is really letting our sellers know, hey, we do have the control as the seller right now. And
you do. And I got to tell you something, as the seller, I've seen some buyers really willing to take risk. $25,000 earnest money, non-refundable after attorney review. I mean, if you're representing a high net worth client buying $1.7 million home in Winnetka or something, I mean, I have seen, as long as we get through attorney review and the seller didn't do anything wrong, $25,000 no matter what. So if you can't get financing and you terminate, I get your $25,000 no matter what. Like I'm seeing people really put themselves out there to win the home.
Yep. And that's what they're doing now. It's a unique market. Yep, for sure.
It is.
Well,
Matt, that's kind of what I think about when I think about this stuff.
Yeah, exactly right. I really appreciate your time today. I think some of the information that you brought up on both sides, the home sale contingency as well as everything else on the other contingencies is great info. I love the comment that you made about understanding the financing contingency and how that can now be used in place of a home sale contingency.
Correct. Really important.
That really, really is. We can't lean on that. And I think to the reiteration of us understanding that we are not attorneys on our end here. We want to provide as much advice as we can that's practical to the real estate transaction. But at the end of the day, emotions can run high in these types of situations when you have somebody making changes to contracts and really putting all their eggs in one basket, right? And doing everything they can to get a property. Desperation kind of comes through. And we want to make sure that if we have clients that are at all unsure or uneasy, that they are seeking correct legal advice and they really feel comfortable with whatever it is that they're moving forward with.
That's, I think, the right answer. I think you defer to the legal counsel, and if that person needs to bring back in the agent, wrap up some information, then you can. But if you're comfortable and not sure what you're doing, talk to the attorney who's going to be helping you on this.
Yeah, 100%. And we have a team for a reason, right? You have your attorney, you have your loan officer, and pull people into the conversation. Do not be afraid to do that at any point, especially if it's going to allow your client to possibly win the offer. More importantly, it's going to actually help the client feel more comfortable that there are multiple hands on deck. So
completely.
All right, Matt, thank you so much for your time. As always, I appreciate it.
Thanks,
I'll make sure to have your contact info and this sheet as well attached to this video.
Call me anytime.
In the email. Thanks, Matt.
All right, I'll see you soon. Thank you, bud.